What up? Happy New Year? Again, little early, that's fine though. Plant Druid has easily been the smoothest clearing build that we've played in PoE 2. Better than Lightning Spear Amazon, better than Poison Pathfinder, better than Slam Titan even. It's simple, it's easy, and it's pretty cheap. That has been our main goal here with the build, keeping it easy and inexpensive, so it's something that's accessible to a lot of players. We could absolutely dump a ton of currency into this build and power scale it to the moon, and maybe we will. So far, the build has been super fun. It gets our recommendation, especially if you're a newer player, or you're a lazy player. The one-button playstyle feels great. The build also performed pretty well on some pinnacle bosses. The King in the Mists, in particular, has some special dialogue for druids, so that was just kind of cool to experience, and it's not like blowing anybody's minds with the single target damage or anything, but it was very safe, and probably some of the easiest uber bossing that we've ever done, even though, again, not the fastest, but for the budget, pretty respectable. Before we jump into it, help us out with the YouTube busy work. Like, subscribe, and hype the video if you're on mobile. These all tell YouTube to show our content to more people so we can keep doing this. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the build and how it's developed since our previous video about just kind of leveling it up. And basically, the way it is developed is that you run around right-clicking through maps, and that's pretty much it for full clearing all maps. Then when you get to bosses, you literally double the complexity by adding in Thrashing Vines, and then still just keep right-clicking with Entangle. And that's it. In terms of staying alive, you're really just going to want to stack a bunch of Energy Shield. That's what we're doing here. We're just getting as much Energy Shield as possible, capping our elemental resistances, getting some amount of Chaos Res, a little bit of life. We're not doing any sort of hybrid armor and Energy Shield. And maybe that would be the play at like a higher budget, but at the budget that we're going for, which is like pretty much all the pieces were like 1 or 2 divines at most. With maybe one exception, everything was relatively cheap gear-wise. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about skills, and maybe one of the bigger costs of the build is actually going up to level 20 skill gems on Entangle and Thrashing Vines. You know, it's not totally mandatory, but obviously it is a pretty big damage increase. Like, skill gem level scaling really is the biggest way to scale up your damage. The other really big way is just getting more crit bonus, and so those are really the two main ways to scale up your damage with this build. So, what we're doing for support gems is still Branching Fissures 2, Magnified Area, Accelerated Growth, Heft, and Rapid Casting for Entangle. Rapid Casting feels pretty good. Having played around with a couple of other things like +1 physical skill gem level, that felt okay, but it does jack the mana cost up a bit more, and it didn't seem to actually, it didn't help with the clear as much as Rapid Casting for Entangle, so this is the setup that we've liked the most. For Thrashing Vines, Considered Casting feels pretty good. And then Concentrated Area also feels really good, you know, like really you're only using Thrashing Vines on bosses, or maybe like very, very stacked up packs of rares. Like, you know, if you're fighting an Essence or something that's really juicy, you might throw that down and then pop the Essence out. Or maybe like an Abyss is spawning and it's spawning like one of those hordes of Abyss monsters, you could throw this on there. But then basically just like kite around them and right click, you know, and that kind of does it. Accelerated growth on Thrashing Vines is also useful, like it's a lot of extra damage, and then again Heft, and then we're doing Physical Mastery, and we're doing that instead of Rapid Casting. Again, just kind of having played around with it, this feels better. It seems to be better in PoB. PoB isn't totally trustworthy with this build. It doesn't quite understand the way that Inevitable Crits works or anything, so that's kind of what we've been doing there. Then for automating Thunderstorm, what we're doing is we're using kind of a lower level Thunderstorm. You need Thunderstorm's eventual level to be 18, so you need to add whatever your plus gem levels is onto the base gem level of the Thunderstorm. And you kind of want to keep your Thunderstorm low because the mana cost of cast on crit triggering over and over again is going to be like kind of painful on bosses. Like, it will zero out your mana. That's probably one of the hardest problems we've had to like solve. One of the things that you could do, and unfortunately I can't really undo it here, is not use a max level cast on crit. Like, if you use like a level 14, that might actually wind up being better, because the main thing you get out of getting a higher level cast on crit is just increased energy gained with each level, and I like, if I could de-level this and not lose the 6 socket, I would maybe play around with that, but I don't think it's a huge deal. But the point is, you don't want to use a max level Thunderstorm. You actually want it to be like level 10 or 12 or whatever level is required, you know, once you add in all of your plus gem levels from your gear, to bring it up to 18, because that's the minimum required to drench bosses and all levels of enemies. Then you have a couple of really good support gems, Shock Conduction, Efficiency to keep the cost low. And The magnified area and spell cascade are things we played around with. We played around with some other stuff. We did some of that on stream, actually, like Bone Cage and Astral Projection. Didn't really seem like it did a lot. A couple of other skills as well, just to add more cast time into cast on critical to like make it take longer to trigger, just so that it's not triggering quite so frequently with Thunderstorm, but nothing ever really felt all that great. So this is what we went with, and ultimately on bosses, you're just gonna kind of have to take advantage of mana remnants, and we'll get to that in a second. So we're still using Pounce a little bit here and there just to move around, and you can throw an Uruk's Smelting onto that just to make it break more armor in conjunction with Mark for Death and give you more physical damage. Not a huge deal, but it is something you can do. Convalescence is like really like one of our big defensive bonuses here. Like we do need a bit of spirit. You know, we're getting 61 spirit out of the body armor, which it doesn't have to be out of the body armor. It could be out of the amulet or body armor, but like some amount of spirit in order to afford both clarity, mana remnants, mana remnants and convalescence, and then also clarity along with the qualityed up cast on crit. And what Convalescence does is it just, whenever your energy shield has started to drop low and you're still kind of taking damage, you can hit this and it will just immediately begin regenerating your energy shield and prevent it from being interrupted. And then we're able to get some cooldown recovery and like increased duration out of cooldown recovery, prolonged duration. But then the real like moneymaker here, the real like fancy part of this is Second Wind, gives you a second use. It does give you a ton of reduced cooldown or less cooldown recovery rate, so it really jacks up the cooldown. But what it does is it also gives you 1% of your max life per second of cooldown. So because this is a pretty long cooldown, like 38 seconds, this is like a huge life flask whenever you use this keybind. It gives you a massive amount of life back in addition to restarting that energy shield regen and not making you immune to death. Like you could definitely still die while Convalescence is going on if you're just face tanking a bunch of damage. But if you're playing defensively and you're like, moving around and being pretty smart about it, you can really like stay alive. And also like the duration is like 8 seconds long. So it is more than enough time to like nope out of a bad situation and stay alive and then get back in and clean things up. And then Mana Remnants is our final skill here, and this is really the way that we were able to fix mana, right? Because on bosses, the cast on crit Thunderstorm proccing was just like a real issue, and so what we're doing is we're using Mana Remnants with Harmonic Remnants to give like the chance of extra remnants and make them easier to pick up. And then we played around with Remnant Potency. This is kind of interesting. It gives you like a lot more mana out of the remnants, but there's a 3-second delay. So you kind of have to like plan ahead. You kind of have to be playing like kind of smartly. Basically, you kind of have to be like hugging and, like if I was fighting the map portal right now, this is usually how I'm like fighting the map boss, right? Is I'm like moving around them, just hugging them the whole time, trying to pick up the remnants before I run out of mana so that they will recover my mana, before it becomes an issue. And then Clarity we're socketing in because we do have enough spirit to be able to afford to do that. It's not really mandatory. Like this is pretty not necessary. If you don't have a full 61 extra spirit, you can drop Clarity and get away with that just fine. All right, now let's go ahead and start talking about how the tree has progressed since that sort of basic leveling setup to where we are now. So we're still running the same ascendancy nodes. Like Paths Not Taken is pretty good. There's some pretty interesting bonuses that are only available through this. Getting the +2 passive points down here is nice as well. Lesser Harm, still amazing. Like basically being crit damage immune or crit chance immune against enemies under normal circumstances is pretty awesome. Inevitable critical hits just totally changes our gearing paradigm. And then Entwined Realities is really, really fun. We're able to pick up a bunch of really good notable passives in the tree. Things like Stormbreaker. We're chilling and shocking enemies all the time. That's 40% increased damage. We would not be pathing all the way up to get that. We would not be pathing all the way up to get Cut to the Bone, I think, in an in-game tree, or at least we wouldn't want to. But being able to just break armor all the time is insanely good. And getting that just by coming over here feels good. And so we're kind of just taking advantage of that around large sections of the tree, just hitting these notables here. Very, very good Blood Tearing and Shredding Force. Coming over here and hitting Power of the Storm and Chronomancy and Mental Perseverance, getting some damage taken from Mana Before Life feels kind of nice without any of the downsides of like actually coming over and taking Mind Over Matter and losing all of our mana recovery, like not full committing, just getting a little bit of extra defensive cushion feels good. Getting Dangerous Blossom without spending all these points coming over here, lots and lots of stuff where we're doing that with these keystones turning into from nothings. And then we're also using a from nothing up here in the area of resonance. This is probably the most expensive piece of gear in the entire build. It costs 3 divs, so not exactly breaking the bank. And we're able to get for the jugular, true strike, spell haste, and style bender, all of which add a bunch of damage. They also add a bunch of stats, 10 int, 10 dex, 10 strength. Evasion rating doesn't do anything for us, but like pretty good. You could maybe take Chakra of Thought as well. 8% damage taken from Mana Before Life is like maybe an option. Maybe you don't want to do that. I mean, that's fine. You know, these 4 are all really, really good. And then we're just kind of, you know, doing that a lot over here on the side of the tree as well. So in terms of the Anoint that we're going with, there are a few options, but the best one is, like for damage, it's going to be either Throat Seeker for increased damage bonus and a slight reduced crit chance, or Cooked for the same crit damage bonus but some reduced defenses. Reducing the defenses seemed like a bad idea, so we didn't go with Cooked. Instead, we went with Throat Seeker. You know, seemed to be a lot better option, and it was very noticeable as soon as we anointed this. Damage went up a lot. Now, something you can play around with earlier on as an Anoint option, it is cheaper, is Bone Chains. This is definitely cheaper, and it'll make it so that all of your physical spell crits, which that's all of your spell hits are going to be crits, will build up Pin. This is useful for CCing enemies, like, very easily, and just, like, being safer in mapping. And it does work on bosses, too. Like, you will pin a boss once or twice, and then heavy stun them. The issue with this really just boiled down to, like, you could CC stuff, or you could just straight up kill it, and killing it is safer, so that's the direction we went, ultimately. There are a lot of other good crit node options around the tree, things like Moment of Truth or Deadly Force, you know, a bunch of other good crit options as well that you can take that could be good alternatives, but nothing's really better than Throat Seeker all around. Now, one other cheap option that you could play around with if you are taking this camaraderie wheel here, at least according to Pob, is Inspiring Ally. It seems like, you know, again, Pob may be wrong, but it seemed like Inspiring Ally, all the damage increases, you know, this makes it so that increases to companion damage apply to you. All of the bonuses to minion damage would then double dip. And so instead of getting 75% increased damage out of this wheel and 75% increased minion damage, it would be 150% increased damage, which is a lot. It's not as good as the Throat Seeker bonus, but it is cheaper, so that is maybe a budget option if you wanted to go in a more damage-directed kind of way. Alright, and with that being said about the tree, now let's talk a little bit about gear. So our gear is mostly pretty cheap. Like, this is just a very basic staff. It had some crit stats on it, and +5 level of spell skills and some spell damage, and it seemed to be somebody's brick. And we just grabbed it for, like, 1 divine, and kind of got lucky on an unveil for damage is extra lightning damage. You know, damage is extra, anything can be a useful prefix. Increased spell damage and increased physical damage with spells or physical spell damage. It comes from a physical spell damage staff. Can be like the ideal prefixes, but really the most important stuff on your weapon is like crit chance with spells, crit spell damage bonus, and level of spell skills. You know, those 3 suffixes are all really important, and you can get all the way up to level 7 or +7 level of spell skills. That is going to be a lot more damage than +5. It's also going to be a lot more cost, and because we were wanting to keep this cheap, that's why we went, you know, like a 1 or 2 div staff is going to be a lot better than like a 100 div staff for the purposes of budget, maybe not for the purposes of, you know, doing more damage. Then a lot of the rest of our gear is just like very simple stuff. Like a lot of the rings, you're basically just going after like 3 suffixes that are good, you know, like cast speed, resistances. I think this is one that was self-craft. It has some cast speed, it has some resistances. Cool. This one, cast speed, resistances, bit of stats, bit of rarity. Got lucky on this one. Bit of mana also helps with just like, you know, not totally being out of mana on bosses, and to have whatever damage taken from Mana Before Life, like that helps too. This amulet's not, like, super amazing. This is one that we crafted using the same method that we did in our last Poison Pathfinder build. You start with a base that has spell skills on it, and then you do just some very basic essence crafting, and you use that Global Defenses prefix, and then you kind of are at the mercy of Exalts being helpful, and on this one, they weren't too great. Like, Life Regen and Flat Max Mana. And then the Unveil being Energy Shield from Equipped Body Armor instead of just % increased Energy Shield is a little annoying too. This Body Armor, it's got some Energy Shield, it's got some resistances, mostly it had Spirit, that was the main appeal. The helmet is pretty good. It has just a decent chunk of energy shield, and then crit chance to chaos res. Again, kind of useful. The belt has some stats and some life. Nothing really special there at all. Some resistances. This is one that I think I bought for like 1 exalt and just kind of closed my eyes and exalted it some more, and it turned out to be okay. Did that like 5 or so times, and this one was the best of the 5. You know, that's like a really effective way to get a lot of these pieces of gear. Like, is just craft some stuff, and most of it'll wind up being garbage, but some of it'll be good, and then you wear the stuff that isn't bad. Same kind of goes with this this pair of boots. Like, these weren't anything super special. They had 35% move speed, and then kind of some bad other stats on them, like not even fully fleshed out, and you know, you close your eyes and exalt and hope it comes out good, and it came out okay. So again, just another relatively budget piece of gear. The only uniques of real note that we're using here are Night Scale. Still, this is one that we bought, and it just had perfect crit rolls on it, and that's really all we're going for with this anyways. And then like Lavinia's Spirits, this is actually one that we bought and then found another one like immediately afterward, which is always fun. This is kind of the lazy man's alternative to using a mana flask. Like, you can just use a regular mana flask and you won't really need to hit it much, except maybe on bosses. You know, you'll hit it some and it'll be a lot more effective on bosses, but this does actually recover your mana all the time, because Night Scale makes it so you can't regen mana if you haven't dealt a crit recently, and you're always having dealt a crit recently when you're in combat, so your mana regen will be very strong thanks to Night Scale in normal situations. Lavinia's Spirits, any sort of flask, doesn't regenerate mana, it recovers mana. Love that tricky wording from GGG, and so that's why it still works in this situation. So it's just like very lazy approach to getting some mana regen, and it's not terribly expensive, but it's not mandatory either. Then the most expensive piece of gear that we're using in the entire build, extremely optional. It basically, I stole this from the Poison Pathfinder. It's a Soul Ross Resolve. You don't need it, but you know, it does keep you alive. It does make staying alive a little easier, so it has definitely saved my bacon a few times in mapping. So, you know, use them if you got them, don't worry if you don't. And then Stone Charm we're still sticking with, although I don't know how important it really is. Nascent Hope and Sanguis Heroum are a couple of nice, very basic, unique charms that just help a lot. You know, freeze immunity and energy shield recharge starting on use. You know, whenever you get frozen is really good for any energy shield based build, and then bleed immunity is also always good for any sort of energy shield based build. All right, one other thing to touch on is just the jewels in the tree, and really what you're shooting for is just like crit chance with spells, crit damage bonus, max energy shield, anything else that you could get that's a defensive stat, like energy shield recharge rate or something that can be useful. Getting the energy shield recharge faster start out of defendable ward is pretty cool. Like, that took the start of energy shield recharge, just these 3 points, from like 4 seconds down to like 2.5, which is a pretty huge difference, I have to say. So any more energy shield recharge stats that you can get really do help. But mainly you just want as much max ES and like crit chance, crit bonus as you can get out of jewels. Alright, so we had like 3 pretty commonly asked questions about the build, and just to hit on those, like first off, how do you fix mana? We've kind of talked about that a little bit, but mainly it just boils down to mana remnants and kind of using those effectively, hugging bosses, and just obviously still dodging their skills, but hugging bosses and just chugging up those mana remnants as quickly as you can. Mana remnants do overcharge your mana as well, which it like helps a lot if you're taking some of your damage as mana too. Like, that's really helpful. So it is kind of like double dipping both like offensive and defensive value to have that mana remnants and be eating up all those remnants all the time. In terms of how to fix boss damage, the main way to do it is just always make sure that you're keeping Thrashing Vines down. So like, do double check what your duration on your Thrashing Vines is, and then get used to kind of hitting that right as it's about to fall off. You know, if it's under 3 seconds, get kind of accustomed to hitting it every 2.5. And then the other thing is just simply like getting more crit bonus, crit chance, and skill gem levels is really just the cheat code to doing more boss damage on a caster. And then finally, tankiness. It really just boils down to spending more currency on getting more energy shield. As boring as that is, like if you have 10,000 energy shield, you are a lot tankier than if you only have like 6k, and that 6k is a lot tankier than only having 4k, and so on. The more energy shield you have, and to a lesser extent the more life you have, the tankier you're going to be, and ultimately that just boils down to like crafting better gear and, worst case scenario, spending currency on better gear. Because at the end of the day in PoE 2, that really is the way to be tanky. It is all about your gear. So that is Plant Druid. It's been a really fun, really smooth build. We absolutely recommend it. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us and help us make more PoE content, consider becoming a channel member as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.